This was not the Memorial Day sermon I expected to give when the week began. With the murder this week of two Israeli embassy staffers, Yaron Leshinsky and Sarah Milgram, outside the Capitol Jewish Museum, a place many of us have been, I felt compelled to adjust my teaching for this morning. The attacker did not target Israelis, though, or the embassy. He went to a Jewish space to shoot whomever was there. He did not know the victims would be embassy employees. He did not know that people, according to an article by Barry Weiss, happened to be at an event about delivering humanitarian relief across the region, including to Palestinians in Gaza, was of no concern to the alleged murderer, she wrote. He was there to free Palestine, the slogan he shouted after he executed them. According to several witnesses, she writes, after the shooting, he reached into a bag, pulled out a keffiyeh, and said, "I did this for Gaza." He knew Jewish people would be there, and anyone was the target. And this feels different. And maybe it is proximity, maybe it is the intensity, maybe it is a sense of escalation. For these past days, I have been searching for a moment to just catch my breath. Sometimes sermons are for you. Sometimes they're for me. A moment, or maybe even two, to breathe, to settle myself, to ground myself, because the world feels like it is swirling, storming, and unsettled. This shooting is compounded with the pressures of feeling like mounds of vitriol is directed at me as a Jew, as a lover of Israel, as a political moderate, as one who loves our country and is horrified by many of the assaults on basic liberties, science, and accountability, especially when the excuse for these infringements is the language of fighting anti-Semitism. As I do, I look to our texts for insight and perspective to help me. And I found that in this parsha this week it says, "Do not wrong one another, but fear your God, for I am your God." This verse caught my attention. Rashi, the 11th century commentator, explains that "do not wrong one another," al tonu, appears twice in the reading. He teaches the first is to say that we should not wrong one another in financial matters. And the second time, al tonu, means we should not wrong one another with verbal provocation. At this moment in our country, it feels like we are failing at each. I'm feeling gaslit by a fight against anti-Semitism being used to slash scientific research, upend legal protections of due process, and cultivate an environment which has so dramatically moved the line of acceptable speech and action that once unthinkable is now normalized. When we move the boundaries of acceptable speech, we also move the boundaries of acceptable actions. If the conversations I am having with people, confidentially in my office or openly in the hallways and coffee shops and playgrounds, are any indication, I know I am not alone in saying I feel like I am in a constant state of alert. I'm worried about every high headline, be it Doge or Gaza or anti-Semitism. And remember, there are the normal concerns of life as well. My kids, my family, and my friends, the normal things of life continue too. For example, last Thursday, I had the honor of being at one's deathbed. And that same evening, I saw another Bethel member who had his bar mitzvah right here on this bima 2 decades ago tell me that he and his wife were expecting their first child. Truly, the blitz of life continues regardless of the headlines. With all these things and so much more happening to each of us, how do we manage this anxiety that we carry, this over-alertness that we feel in our bodies? What do we do when al tonu, do not wrong one another, feels quaint at best? I'm not talking about what political response that others are engaged in. I'm talking about emotional and spiritual response. First, it has to be okay to say that I am not okay. We greet each other with, how are you? And we reflexively answer, okay. And I guess we say this just to keep the conversation moving. Maybe the encounter is just a social construct of a greeting and we should not expect a deeper interaction in it. And while that is true for many interactions, we must have space in relationships for the answer to be not so good today. And we need those spaces more than I think that we are aware of, or at least I do. Creating spaces for us not to be okay is a way of us showing up for each other. We can share a degree of vulnerability with each other, not complaining about the headlines, but sharing how we are triggered or fearful at this moment. As they say, we have to be able to feel the feelings. Whether it is the formal efforts of the synagogue around Israel as we meet in the open conversations about Israel spaces that have been going on, or it's about the resilience affinity group that we've created for federal workers and those impacted by government changes. These are two areas where we are carving out spaces for people to not be okay, to listen to each other, and to be seen as they are. I wonder why we're trained to present everything as if it were okay. Is it fear that the alternative will be seen as weakness? But we know that is not correct or healthy or useful. Judaism teaches us about sadness. While there are many places where our tradition praises the state of joy, it also normalizes that it is okay not to be okay. When the psalmist writes verses like this in Psalm 130, we know we have a historic experience of being in the emotional pit, the darkness, and the fear. Out of the depths, I call you, O Lord. O Lord, listen to my cry. Let your ears be attentive to my plea for mercy. Can you imagine the fragile place the author of those words might have been in? And our tradition lets us know that it is okay not to be okay in this way. Judaism normalizes for us that we too may be calling from the depths at a particular moment. Or Nachman of Braslav in his Likudei Maharan, who is the greatest cheerleader of joy in Judaism, acknowledges, he says, greater still is it to gather courage to actually pursue gloom and to introduce it into the joy, he writes. Rav Nachman is teaching us to address dread directly so we can make space for other emotions. If we avoid gloom, it will overwhelm us. But to pursue, to acknowledge, to name it, may transform it. So I am not okay, and that is okay. I need to be with you to feel the support of community. I need to be with you to feel seen as we share our sense of concern together. Because feeling alone or isolated leads to despair, while sharing the burdens buoys us. In the same article, Weiss introduces us to Yaron and Sarah, Wednesday's victims. She writes, Yaron was born in Israel to a Jewish father and a Christian mother. He was raised partly in Germany. He spoke German, Hebrew, and Japanese, and the mixed nature of his life embodied the very best of the West and the openness of our civilization. His friend Miriam Waba, a Coptic Christian born in Egypt, said he was a kind and generous friend, a devout Christian, and a defender of Israel. We would sit and debate early Christian theology for hours over a gin and tonic, and he would check in on me after every attack on Christians in Egypt. Sarah Milgram was a Jew raised in Kansas who began working at the embassy in November 2023, a month after the Hamas massacre of October 7, 2023. She had 2 master's degrees, one in international studies from American University, and a second in natural resources and sustainable development from the United Nations University for Peace. Sarah was an idealist. She volunteered with Tech to Peace, which supports entrepreneurship between young Palestinians and Israelis. What can we do? I cannot control the wide world, but I do have my own sphere of influence, as you do as well. I must call out anti-Semitism when it occurs and in these new ways that it presents itself. Objecting to Israeli war plans is not anti-Semitism. Objecting to Israel's right to exist is, though. I must acknowledge the burden I am carrying and productively address it. We are wound too tight right now, and it will lead to too many around us, or even ourselves, to make bad decisions. We will drink too much, or avoid relationships, or engage in other relationships. We will respond from a place other than our best selves because we are so depleted. We must show up for each other and ourselves. Altonu, do not wrong one another. That is the teaching from the Parsha, and it is not easy. And it feels like the exact opposite is swirling around us. We are not alone, though. That is the centrality of community. So may the memories of Yaron and Sarah be nothing less than a blessing for each of us. Shabbat Shalom.